So we're doing a vlog on Beep Beep Belief, traffic jams in KL. So this song is kind of interesting because I took a picture of a Thai temple right before I flew to Kuala Lumpur because I had been taking a trip to Thailand and then I went to Kuala Lumpur before I went on to my next destination. And I really liked this temple, so I took a picture of it and then I superimposed it with Gemini's image abilities into like a chibi street in Kuala Lumpur because there are actually some Thai temples in Kuala Lumpur. I have not visited those, but I really like the idea of the Thai temple with in the middle of a busy street intersection in KL. So that's kind of where I got that image from because it is actually from an actual photo I took of the temple and then just superimposed it into an intersection in Kuala Lumpur. But this song is kind of about how religion plays a key role or talking point in Kuala Lumpur, I found. Because when I visit there, I always find it interesting because people tend to bring up like what religion they are in, or they ask you about your religion, and it's always kind of an interesting discussion point because in most countries people don't really talk about their faith or their religion. It's like if you go to Japan, most Japanese people are not religious. They might say they're Buddhist or they're Taoist, but it doesn't really play an integral part in their everyday discussions, and they tend to only go to temples or shrines on holidays, etc. So it's not a key point. And like when I was in Taiwan for a long time, kind of the same. People might be Buddhist or they might be Christian, but they're not probably going to be discussing that overly much with people, even if they're close to it. It's just not a real big topic of discussion. And a lot of people in Asia tend to be agnostic or atheists, so they don't really have a religion in the typical sense, and it just isn't a discussion point. But when I go to KL, it's always interesting because usually your cab drivers are very, very friendly when you're in the city. And like I had one cab driver who was Hindi, and he was very interested in what religion this person had. And also, I had a cab driver who was Muslim and telling me how he can't go gambling in the heights because of it says on his card he's Muslim. He cannot do that. It's a big bummer. So it's always kind of interesting to hear the stories and to see the confluence of faiths that happens in KL because you have Buddhist temples, you have Hindu temples, you have Muslim mosques. You sometimes have an occasional Christian church. So you have all these faiths that are kind of converged in one point, and you have all these people with their different opinions and beliefs, but they tend to not try to be overly converted in their culture. So you don't really have to worry about people trying to bother you or trouble you into belonging to their faith. Although I will say the first time I went to KL, my friend who I had gone with, the one who snapped the picture for the original chibi art for the previous um, vlog of me by the tree, he went to a tour some mosques, and when he was doing that, he came back later in the day and he said, Anna, he said that was a very interesting experience. And I hadn't gone because I had to catch up some emails, and I was a little tired from my flight to get to KL that first time, and I was like, you go ahead and go, but I'm just gonna rest here at the hotel because it was a bit of a long journey for me to get there, and I was like, I just need a bit of a rest. But when he came back, he said, they offered that if I converted to Islam as opposed to being a Hindu like he was and his family was, he said I could have more than one wife. And I asked them if possible, could my wife have more than one husband because it's progressive, and they said that it wasn't that progressive. So it's always kind of interesting to hear these conversations, and also my friend is sometimes extremely ornery. But I think that it is unique to KL compared to other places I've been in how people tend to talk about or to discuss religion very openly and very enthusiastically compared to other places. And as a millennial, I'm very much like most millennials of my generation. It's not that we're anti-religion or anti religious establishment, but I think that growing up in Western culture and having grandparents who were what we would call part of like the Pentecostal and like in the 1970s, I think they called them like Holy Roller movement, that's not really something that we wanted to necessarily adopt as children. I think, it was one of the kind of running jokes when I was growing up. I was kind of the Episcopalian child because I'm very quiet and I don't really get too head up about religious things and I'm very calm and it's just not a big point for me. And it's not to downplay it for those who do feel it's a big point. And I think that the other thing that's a big factor with coming from Western culture is we do have like the polarization and the politicization of religion that has happened in the last few years. And it's not to say that is negative or positive, it's simply an observation as someone that is kind of standing outside of it and looking at it from a global lens of having traveled and seen how different places approach religious beliefs and religious opinions. And I think it is kind of interesting in the last few years how more and more people who tend to be from the Western culture and who are in their, millennial Generation Z, we just don't tend to be particularly religious and we certainly don't tend to talk about that too much either because it's just not something that's really on our frontal lobe. I think, most of us are trying to pay the rent and make sure we have food in the fridge and the lights on. And it's not that we don't care about religious things, but it's just not really as important to us as those other things. So I think that it's one of those things that's always interesting when you go to a new place or experience a new thing to see how other cultures and other groups approach religion and religious discussions. So this song was kind of I would say it's like my Walter Mitty moment interpretation of my 2 to 3 cab drivers and their discussions with me. And it's not exactly like the way the convo went because I tend to be very quiet and very just want to listen to what the other person is saying. So it's not like we had this heart to heart religious heartwarming moment. But it is like we just kind of sit there with one another in that conversation and we both just were enjoying the other person's opinion about things. And that's what I hope this song encapsulates is that even if people might not agree or might not necessarily be in the same group or faith or maybe any faith at all, they can still find a common ground and a way to communicate that is positive and good. And that's kind of what this Beat Beat Belief encapsulates. It's just a fun song to try to bring unity to a situation that can sometimes be frayed.